Hi everyone and welcome back to Scale Studio. Today is a big day because this is the first video in official collaboration with Panzermeister36. Today we're both going to be working on the interiors of our StuGs, so buckle up because this is going to be good. So the build is all done and I actually didn't clean it, I probably should have, but I instantly sprayed it down with a coat, a very fine coat of Tamiya lacquer primer. And this is going to make sure that my Vallejo paints don't wear off because they can be pretty fragile. And so I'm going to prime it and then varnish it afterwards with a gloss varnish. And same with the hull. I'm trying to make sure that there's no orange peel effect because that's just going to mess everything up and make it look much less professional, and the gloss coat really won't do anything. Then I'm going to spray it with the same Vallejo Model Master Ivory that I used on the Tiger. Somebody commented that it should be a little bit darker, but from what I've seen in museums, this is actually pretty close. And again, I'm trying to put it down as finely as possible. Now I'm going to use my homemade wet pellet, tutorial about it coming out soon, and mix a red oxide. For the Tiger, I used just Vallejo Light Rust, but I used Vallejo Light Rust and Vallejo Orange Brown for this one, and I think it made a better oxide red. And I just painted it on. The awesome thing about a wet pellet is it slightly dilutes the paint for you already without making it super watery, so it's perfect for brush application. As you can see, I'm just brushing it on. When you're brush painting, make sure to keep a wet edge, which basically means don't let the paint dry up on the surface before you're done brush painting it. Next, I'm going to take a lighter color, in this case, more orange brown and less light rust, and I'm just going to stipple it onto the original base coat, and this is going to create some wear patterns and make it look a little bit more worn and interesting. Almost like Night Shift's distressing, but without hairspray or any of those techniques. I'm not saying that I've abandoned distressing, but that's the main point here, is to recreate that without all the steps. After that, I'm going to start painting these sticks. I think they're smoke grenades or German stick grenades, but the handles are Vallejo black brown and the tips are a Vallejo base gray to make them look a little bit like metal. I did end up destroying these with a heat gun, but I'm not going to show that in this video because it's just bent plastic that I hate looking at. The seats I also did in a Vallejo German camo, or German black brown camo, and I think they actually looked really good this way. I could have done them the way I did the Tiger, but I decided not to. Then some Vallejo silver for the gun breech, and it's just Vallejo silver. I went back and polished it with graphite afterwards, but I forgot to film it, so sorry. For the canvas bag, I base coated it Iraqi sand. I'm just trying to figure out how to paint this khaki look right now, and so this is my experimentation. After I painted it fully with Iraqi sand, I dry brushed it with a light coat, which just was lightened down by Vallejo Ivory. And then after I was done with this light coat, I thought it needed more contrast, and so I went in with a more ivory, less Iraqi sand. And even though it looks super extreme, I think it actually turned out very nice with some upcoming effects. The guns were painted gunmetal, and by itself this is not a good choice, but with a couple extra techniques that I'll be showing later, or actually probably not showing, just describing, it does make them look very nice. With the base coat and details painted, I covered the whole thing in a thin coat of Tamiya Clear, which is their gloss varnish, and it's really strong. After that, I went in with some Tamiya black panel liner, which I think actually adds a really nice amount of contrast to the white, even though you wouldn't think it looks good. You'd want to use a lighter color. I think the white actually really accepted that and made it look really good. You can see me here stippling the surface of the now dry Tamiya panel liner to create that same effect I did in the turret bay, or turret fighting compartment floor, which just kind of models it and adds more tones to that red oxide. Here's how it looks when that's all done. I really like how it looks. Then I applied the panel liner over everything else, just moving it into grooves and around details. I followed that up with some raw umber on the canvas bag, and I think it made it look really good. It kind of refined that. After that, I used a cotton swab with some enamel thinner on it and just cleaned up the excess. This is the really easy way to do it. On more detailed areas, I'm going to use a paintbrush though. Then I used a sponge to do some chipping with undiluted German camo black brown. Just make sure you have very little paint on the sponge and tap it against the surface. Very lightly. Too hard and it's going to be blotchy. I tried a dust wash on the radio because it was black and so it needed something, but this was definitely not what it needed. It turned out really badly. And then back to chipping. I then picked out the details on the radio with a fine brush. Now I'm going to add some diluted burnt umber oil paint and just put it over each chip area. This is actually a really, really good rust effect. Even better than streaking rust, I think. It just looks old and rusty, and it actually has some tonal variation because of its enamel, because it's an oil, not an enamel. Then all you have to do is take a brush and kind of feather the edges so it looks like the rust is kind of spreading over the surface like it usually does. Be careful not to remove all of the oil paint though. I actually stippled some over the red oxide panels again to give them even further contrast and weathering, and I think they just look amazing by now. And as you can see, the burnt umber actually really draws the chips together and makes them look more realistic. Then I'm gonna actually mix a pigment from gray, dark brown, and yellow chalk pastels, and I think this makes a really good pigment. You want to go for a kind of dusty, dirty color that's still dry. just look outside and you'll be able to find something that looks like what you want to go for. It's basically just dry dirt, and it's pretty universal. I'm then going to stipple it over the panels, but only around the edges. I want to make sure that it looks like the crew pushed it kind of out of the way of their feet while they were moving around, of course inadvertently, but that's what kind of happens, is it gathers around corners. Make sure to stipple it on so that you have as much texture as possible. And as you can see, it kind of just looks like caked up mud that's dried out on the bottom. To finish off those chips, I rubbed each edge that had chips on it with this graphite stick. It's a pretty hard graphite stick, but basically just go along and rub it along each edge and sometimes even fill in larger chips to make them look more metallic. It really works well and it's super easy to do. Don't use too soft of a pencil because it's not going to make the same effect or as bright of color. This final effect should be saved for the end, and I think it really brings it to life, so definitely try it. Well, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed the video, let me know by smashing that like button and subscribing so you don't miss out on the rest of this series. If you're here from Panzermeister36's channel, let me know by commenting "From the Master" down below. If you'd like to support the channel so I can keep making content, check out my Patreon page where you can get some cool perks in return. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.